This 4-year-old homeless girl is kicked out of church by a priest who says you don't deserve God. But a millionaire saw everything, and something incredible happens. Rate my story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rain poured down as if the sky had broken open, turning the streets of the small town into a torrent of mud and despair. Heavy drops hammered the pavement with a fury that echoed through the old houses, while the wind howled through the ancient trees like a lament. In the midst of this devastating storm, a tiny figure ran towards the church, her bare feet splashing in the rapidly forming puddles. The girl looked barely 2 years old, so fragile and small that her soaked clothes hung loosely on her thin little body. Her auburn hair clung to her pale face, framing large, frightened eyes that emitted no sound. For months, her voice had been lost, swallowed by trauma and abandonment. She approached the heavy church door, trembling violently, and with her small hands tried to push the carved wood. Across the street, a man watched the scene from inside his luxurious car. At 30 years old, he had the look of a movie idol, dark hair perfectly cut, a strong jawline, and green eyes that usually sparkled with confidence. But at that moment, those same eyes carried a deep sadness that he couldn't hide. The recent loss of his wife had left a gaping void in his chest, a hole that not all his fortune could fill. He had stopped the car there by chance, waiting for the storm to subside before heading home. His mansion on the outskirts of town awaited him, empty and silent as always. The wealth accumulated through years of investing in stock market shares and sound investments meant little when he returned home, and there was no one to share the success. The church door finally opened, and the small figure stumbled inside. The wealthy man sighed, adjusted the rear-view mirror, and was about to start the engine when a scream echoed across the square, cutting through the sound of the rain like a blade. "Get out of here, you filthy beggar!" The authoritative voice came from the church. The millionaire frowned and decided to investigate. He got out of the car, shielding himself from the rain with his expensive coat, and approached the entrance to the temple. What he saw made him stop completely. The priest, a portly middle-aged man known for his rigidity, held the girl by the arm and dragged her towards the door. His face was red with anger, his small eyes gleaming with contempt as he yelled at her as if she were an animal. "This is God's house. It's no place for people like you. Go find your vagrant parents and stop dirtying our sacred floor." The child made no sound, just stared at him with absolute terror. Her thin legs could barely support her as he pushed her brutally. The priest raised his foot, clearly ready to kick her out the door, when a firm voice echoed behind him. "Stop!" The religious man turned, still holding the girl. His eyes widened as he recognized the man approaching, the wealthiest businessman in the region, known for his generous donations to the community, but there was something different about that normally serene face. A controlled fury shone in his green eyes. "Let her go, now. Sir, this child is a beggar. She can't stay here dirty. I told you to let her go." The low but threatening tone made the priest back down. He released the girl's arm, who immediately cowered in the corner, trembling not only from cold, but from pure terror. The millionaire crouched down slowly, keeping his distance so as not to scare her further. "Hi, little one," he murmured softly. "It's okay now." The girl looked at him with her huge eyes, filled with a sadness that shouldn't exist in someone so young. She didn't speak, perhaps she couldn't, but something in that look touched a sensitive chord in the rich man's heart. It was as if she was silently crying out for help, begging for someone not to hurt her. "Sir, I apologize for the interruption," said the priest, clearly uncomfortable, "but understand that we have rules. Do your rules include kicking children? She's not from here. She always shows up asking for food, disrupting the prayers. And where are her parents?" The priest hesitated. "Well, no one knows for sure. She must have been abandoned." The businessman felt a pang in his chest. Abandoned. How could anyone abandon a child so small and fragile? He carefully extended his hand towards the girl, who recoiled instinctively. "I won't hurt you," he whispered. "I promise." For some interminable moments they stared at each other. The rain continued to fall hard outside, but inside the church there was only silence and tension. Finally, the girl took a tentative step towards him, then another, until she was within his reach. "Are you cold?" She nodded slightly, the first communication she had made. The man took off his expensive coat and wrapped it around her, a gesture so gentle that it filled the child's eyes with silent tears. "I'm going to take you home," he announced, standing up. "She needs a warm place and food." "Sir, that's not wise," protested the priest. "We don't know anything about this child. She could bring problems." "The only problems I see here are adults mistreating those who cannot defend themselves." The priest opened his mouth to protest, but the millionaire's icy gaze made him reconsider. The businessman crouched down again and, with infinite care, picked the girl up in his arms. She was so light that she seemed made of air, and this only increased his determination to protect her. "Let's get out of here," he murmured to her, heading towards the door. As they walked towards the car, the girl rested her little head on his shoulder, a gesture of trust that made the man's heart clench. For some reason he couldn't explain, he felt that this encounter would change his life forever. The mansion stood majestically at the end of the paved road, its huge windows gleaming like jewels against the light stone facade. Perfectly manicured gardens stretched for acres, protected by high walls that guaranteed total privacy. The millionaire drove through the automatic gates, watching in the rearview mirror as the girl looked at everything with silent curiosity, still wrapped in his coat. When he stopped in front of the main entrance, a woman of approximately 50 years emerged from the door, holding a black umbrella. Her posture was rigid, her severe face framed by grey hair tied in an impeccable bun. The housekeeper had managed that house for over 2 decades, since before his marriage, and her loyalty was unquestionable, as was her intolerance to changes in routine. "Sir, I was worried about the storm," she said, approaching the car. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the small figure in the passenger seat. Who is this child?" "I found her at the church. She was being mistreated by the priest," he explained, getting out of the car and walking around to pick up the girl. "She's staying with us tonight." The housekeeper's expression hardened even further. "Sir, this is highly irregular. We know nothing about this child. She may have diseases. She may be dangerous." "Dangerous?" The businessman looked at her incredulously, holding the girl, who seemed even smaller, against his white shirt. "She's 4 years old and weighs less than a cat." "Exactly for that reason. Street children carry all kinds of problems. What if the parents show up? What if there are legal issues? Didn't you think about the consequences?" The girl huddled closer against the man's chest, as if she understood that she was not welcome. Her large eyes moved nervously between the two adults, reading the tension in the air with the heightened sensitivity of someone who had learned to survive by being invisible. "The consequences of letting a child die of cold and hunger." His voice came out harsher than he intended. "I prefer to take that risk." The housekeeper opened her mouth to protest again, but he was already climbing the marble steps towards the entrance. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive. Crystal chandeliers hung from towering ceilings, original works of art decorated the walls, and the Italian marble floor reflected everything like a mirror. The girl looked around with wide eyes, clearly never having seen such opulence. Her little mouth opened slightly as she passed through the main hall, where a curved staircase rose to the second floor like something out of a fairy tale. "I'll prepare a bath for her," murmured the millionaire, heading toward the stairs. "Sir, please be sensible," insisted the housekeeper, following him. "At least we should call the competent authorities." "There are protocols for these situations. The protocols that allowed her to be abandoned and mistreated." He stopped in the middle of the stairs, turning to face her. "No. Tonight she stays here safe, with warm food and a clean bed. Tomorrow we'll decide the next steps." On the second floor, he took her to one of the guest rooms, a spacious room with floral wallpaper and antique hardwood furniture. The girl watched everything in silence, still trembling slightly. When he carefully placed her on the king-size bed, she seemed even smaller, almost lost among the huge pillows. "I'll get dry clothes and food," he said softly. "I won't be long." For a moment she seemed to panic, grabbing onto the sleeve of his shirt with surprising strength for someone so fragile. Her eyes filled with silent tears, as if she feared he would abandon her too. "Hey, I'm not going anywhere," he promised, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm just going to the room next door to get a few things. The door will be open and you can see me all the time, okay?" She watched him intently, as if trying to decipher whether she could trust those words. Finally, she let go of his sleeve slowly, but kept her eyes glued to him. The millionaire kept his promise, always staying in sight while looking for clothes that might fit. He ended up finding an old T-shirt he used to sleep in that would look like a dress on her. In the kitchen, he prepared warm milk with honey and took some plain cookies, avoiding very heavy foods that could harm a clearly malnourished child. The housekeeper watched him from afar, disapproval stamped on every line of her severe face. "This is going to end badly," she murmured as he passed with the tray. "Mark my words." When he returned to the room, he found the girl exactly where he had left her, like a fragile statuette in the middle of the gigantic bed. She accepted the milk with her two small hands, drinking in careful sips as if she feared it would be taken from her at any moment. "Does it taste good?" She nodded, a small smile appearing for the first time on her lips. It was a shy, hesitant smile, but it completely transformed her face. For a moment she seemed exactly what she was, a 4-year-old child who should be playing and laughing, not struggling to survive. "What's your name?" The question made the smile disappear. She lowered her eyes, shrinking again. Apparently, speaking was still too painful, or maybe she had simply forgotten how. "That's okay," he said gently. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. You can show me when you're ready." He sat there, watching her finish the milk and bite small pieces of the cookies. Each movement was calculated, as if she expected the food to be taken away at any moment. The observation made his stomach churn. What kind of life had this child led to develop this constant fear? When she finished eating, he helped her change clothes. The marks he saw on her thin little body, old bruises, scratches, signs of neglect, made his jaw clench with anger. Who had done this to such a small child? After dressing her in his clean T-shirt, he laid her down between the soft sheets. She snuggled among the pillows, but her eyes remained wide open, watchful. "I'm sleeping here tonight," he explained, pulling the covers up to her chin. "The door stays open, and I'll be in the room next door. If you need anything at all, just call me." She watched him move away towards the door, clearly fighting against sleep. Even exhausted, she couldn't relax completely. The millionaire noticed and returned, sitting in an armchair near the bed. "I'll stay here until you fall asleep," he promised. It was only then that she finally allowed her eyes to close. He stayed there for hours, watching the child's irregular breathing gradually calm down, wondering what forces of destiny had placed that girl in his path just when he felt most lost and empty. Morning arrived with golden rays that streamed through the silk curtains, gently illuminating the room where the girl still slept soundly. The millionaire had spent the entire night in the armchair, waking up at every small movement or moan she made, ready to comfort her in case she had nightmares. His muscles ached from the uncomfortable position, but he didn't regret a single minute. When she finally opened her eyes, she seemed confused for a few seconds, as if she couldn't believe she was still in that safe and comfortable place. Her large eyes scanned the luxurious room before finding his face, and then a visible relief passed over her delicate features. "Good morning, little one," he said softly, getting up from the armchair carefully so as not to scare her. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded shyly, pulling the covers up to her chin. The morning light revealed her condition better, the skin too pale, the sunken cheeks, the prominent little bones that betrayed months of malnutrition. But there was something else in her eyes today, a small flame of hope that wasn't there the night before. "Are you hungry?" Another shy nod. He smiled, extending his hand to her. After hesitating for a few seconds, she placed her small hand in his, allowing him to help her out of the gigantic bed. They went down to the kitchen together, where the housekeeper had already prepared breakfast. The woman watched them approach with critical eyes, noting how the girl always stayed close to her employer, like a frightened puppy seeking protection. "I prepared oatmeal with fruit," she announced coldly, "something light for a child, in these conditions." The tone of disdain did not go unnoticed by the millionaire, but he chose to ignore it for now. He sat the girl in one of the high chairs at the solid oak table and served her a small portion of oatmeal, watching how she ate slowly, savoring each spoonful as if it were a treasure. "Sir," said the housekeeper, approaching with a cup of coffee, "during the night I had some reflections on our current situation." "What kind of reflections?" "Well, if you really intend to help this child, there are appropriate ways to do it. Specialized institutions, families qualified for adoption." "She's not a problem to be solved," he interrupted, more abruptly than he intended. The girl stopped eating, looking nervously between the two adults. He forced a reassuring smile for her before continuing in a lower tone. "She's a child who needs care." "Exactly. And we have no experience with children. This house was not prepared for this. There are risks, responsibilities." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell echoing through the main hall. The housekeeper frowned. They weren't expecting visitors so early. She headed to the door while the millionaire continued watching the girl eat, noticing how she tensed when she heard unfamiliar voices approaching. "Sir," the housekeeper returned with a troubled expression, "there's a woman at the door. She says she's come to pick up her daughter." The blood froze in the businessman's veins. The girl dropped the spoon, her eyes widening in absolute terror. She began to tremble violently, hiding her face in her small hands, as if she could become invisible. "What woman?" "She claims to be the child's stepmother. She says she heard that you found her and came to pick her up." The millionaire looked at the girl, who was now crying silently, her whole body shaking with mute sobs. Her reaction said it all. This woman was not someone who brought safety or love. "Tell her there is no child here." "Sir, that would be lying." "Then lie." His voice came out with a firmness that admitted no discussion. "I'll handle it." The housekeeper hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but eventually nodded and went out again. The millionaire knelt next to the girl's chair, trying to calm her down. "Hey, look at me," he murmured softly. "No one will take you from here if you don't want to go. I promise." She raised her tear-filled eyes, searching for signs that he was serious. There was so much fear in that small look that he felt his heart break. What kind of life had this child lived, to have so much terror of someone who was supposed to take care of her? Voices rose in the entrance hall. The housekeeper was clearly struggling to keep the woman outside, but her excuses were running out. It was only a matter of time before she demanded to enter or brought some kind of authority. "I'm not leaving without her," shouted a rough female voice. "I know she's in there. Someone saw her being brought here last night." The girl got up from the chair, staggering, grabbing onto his shirt with despair. Her lips moved as if she was trying to speak, but no sound came out. The effort to communicate her affliction was painful to see. "Shh, it's okay," he reassured her, picking her up in his arms. "Let's go to a place where she can't see you." He carried her to the study at the back of the house, away from the main entrance. It was a masculine environment, with shelves filled with books on business and investments, a mahogany desk where stacks of financial documents awaited his attention. The walls were decorated with paintings that showed the evolution of his wealth over the years, photographs of buildings he had bought, contracts of millionaire applications, certificates of his stock market holdings. She cowered in the leather armchair, still trembling. He sat on the edge of the desk, keeping close but giving her space. "That woman, did she hurt you?" The girl closed her eyes tightly, as if the question brought memories too painful to bear. Then very slowly she nodded. The anger he felt was so intense that for a moment he couldn't breathe properly. How could someone deliberately hurt a child so small and defenseless? What kind of monster did that? "She's not going to hurt you anymore," he promised, his voice low but full of determination. "Not while I'm alive." The shouts outside were getting louder. The housekeeper was clearly struggling to keep the woman outside, but her excuses were running out. It was only a matter of time before she demanded to enter or brought some kind of authority. "Listen," he said, kneeling in front of the armchair. "I need to go talk to that woman. I'll find out what she wants and how we can solve this. But you're going to stay here, in this room, and you're not going to leave until I get back. The door has a lock on the inside. As soon as I leave, you close it and don't open it for anyone but me." "Understood." She looked at him with huge, frightened eyes, but nodded. "I'll be back," he promised. "No matter what happens out there, I'll come back to get you." When he left the office, he made sure she locked the door as agreed. Then, taking a deep breath, he headed to the entrance hall to face the woman who had turned that child's life into hell. The woman who was in the entrance hall did not at all correspond to the maternal image that the millionaire had expected. She was approximately 40 years old, with disheveled hair dyed artificial blonde, and cheap clothes that tried to disguise her real social condition. Her small, calculating eyes quickly scanned the luxurious environment, clearly evaluating every expensive object she could see. "So you're the rich guy who picked up my stepdaughter," she said bluntly, chewing gum vulgarly. "Nice mansion. Must have cost a fortune." "I am the owner of this house," he replied coldly. "And you are?" "I'm the girl's stepmother. I took care of her since she was a baby after the real parents, well, after they couldn't take care of her anymore." Her fake smile revealed yellowed teeth. "I imagine how expensive it must be to feed and dress a child here, in this fancy place." The insinuation was clear, and it made the businessman's stomach turn. This woman had not come to pick up the girl out of love or concern. She had come for money. "The child is well cared for," he said carefully. "If you are really responsible for her, you must be relieved to know that she is safe." "Oh, of course I am." The woman laughed loudly, an unpleasant sound that echoed through the elegant hall. "But look here, sir, what can I call you?" "That doesn't matter." "Well, nameless sir, the issue is that raising a child is expensive, very expensive. And I, being a simple woman, have always had difficulty giving her everything she deserves." Her eyes gleamed with malice. "But now that I see that there are generous people willing to help—" "How much?" The direct question took her by surprise. She blinked a few times before regaining her cynical composure. "Well, to start, I think 10,000 would be a fair amount. To cover the costs I had with her so far, you understand. Food, clothes, medicine when she got sick." The housekeeper, who had been watching the conversation in silence, whispered in horror, "Sir, she's clearly trying—" "I know what she's doing," he muttered back. Then, to the woman, "What if I pay that amount?" "Ah, then she can stay here, at least for now. Children need stability, don't they? And this environment is much better than I could offer." She looked around again, her eyes gleaming with greed. "Of course, I would need to visit her regularly, to check if she's okay, let's say monthly." The housekeeper tightened her lips with indignation, but the millionaire kept his expression neutral. He was beginning to understand this woman's game, and it disgusted him deeply. "I need guarantees that you actually have legal rights over the child." Of course, of course." The woman rummaged in a worn bag and pulled out some crumpled papers. "Here it is. Temporary custody documents, birth certificate, all in order." He examined the papers carefully. They seemed authentic, but there was something that bothered him. The birth certificate indicated that the girl was indeed 4 years old, but the custody documents were relatively recent, dating back only 8 months. Where were the real parents before you took custody? Ah, sad story, said the woman, trying to look moved. Accidents happen, right? Luckily, I was around to take care of the little one. The vagueness of the answer alerted him even more. Everything in that situation seemed wrong, from the girl's reaction of terror to the calculating attitude of this woman who claimed to be her caretaker. 10,000 is a considerable amount, he said slowly. I need time to arrange that amount. Ah, but of course. A businessman like you must have all your money invested in stocks, Bitcoin, and those modern things, right? She smiled maliciously. How about 3 days? Is that enough time? Maybe, but I want to see the girl before. What for? She's fine, isn't she? I want to make sure she agrees with this arrangement. The woman hesitated for the first time. Well, she's just a child, and she might be confused after spending a night in such a different place. Sometimes she gets kind of aloof with me. Aloof? You know how children are. Stubborn, ungrateful. They don't understand that everything I do is for their own good. The millionaire exchanged a meaningful look with the housekeeper. The explanation only confirmed his suspicions about how this woman treated the girl. Even so, I insist on talking to her. The tension on the woman's face became visible. Look, sir, let's be practical. The girl is my legal responsibility. I can take her out of here at any time if I want. I'm being generous in allowing her to stay as long as there is adequate compensation for my sacrifices. And if I don't pay, the fake smile disappeared completely. Then I'll have to take her back home. And I must say that our financial situation hasn't been very good lately. Maybe I'll have to accept some opportunities that have appeared for her. The veiled threat made the millionaire's blood boil. This woman was practically admitting that she would sell or exploit the child if she didn't receive the money. 3 days, he repeated, controlling his anger. But during that time, she stays here. Perfect. The woman smiled again, clearly satisfied. Oh, and one more thing. It would be better not to involve third parties in our little negotiation. Authorities sometimes complicate simple situations like this, and I really wouldn't want to have to take the girl to other places. With that, she turned and left, leaving a trail of cheap perfume and implicit threats. The housekeeper closed the heavy door and leaned against it, visibly shaken. "Sir, this is blackmail," she exclaimed. "Pure and simple." "I know," he murmured, running his hands through his hair, "and she knows that I know. You can't give in to these demands. It will be the beginning of an endless extortion." The millionaire looked towards the study where the girl was waiting. He knew that the housekeeper was right. Paying this woman would be setting a dangerous precedent, but the alternative was to allow the child to return to a situation of abuse and possible exploitation. "I need to talk to her," he said, referring to the girl. "Maybe there are other options." When he returned to the study, he found the door still locked. He knocked gently. "It's me, little one. You can open it." The sound of the lock being turned was followed by the door opening slowly. The girl looked at him with huge, frightened eyes, clearly having heard parts of the conversation, even from afar. "Did she leave?" Those were the first words she said, and her voice was hoarse, as if it hadn't been used for a long time. The fragile sound broke his heart. "She did," he confirmed, kneeling to be at her height. "But she'll be back." The terror that crossed the child's face was devastating. She threw herself into his arms, clinging to him with desperate strength. "Don't let me go with her," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "Please. She hurts me." At that moment, hugging that terrified child, the millionaire made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. 3 days passed like lightning, and the millionaire found himself in a situation that he never imagined facing. In the vaults of his company, he kept reserves in dollars and euros sufficient to buy a small town. but he had never felt so powerless in the face of such a relatively small amount. 10,000 was nothing compared to his net worth, but paying meant feeding a monster that would only grow with time. The girl had begun to open up during those days. He discovered that her name was Auburn, a beautiful name that she whispered timidly when he asked for the third time. She had begun to smile more, especially when the housekeeper, despite her initial reservations, prepared special cookies for her, or when he let her draw on expensive papers from his office. "Grandma Elena is tough, but makes tasty sweets," said Auburn one morning, referring to the housekeeper by the nickname she had created spontaneously. The stern woman had feigned annoyance with the nickname, but he noticed how her eyes softened every time the girl called her that. It was impossible not to become attached to that child. Auburn had a way of tilting her head when she was curious, of holding his hand with such confidence, of sleeping curled up like a kitten in the middle of the gigantic bed. She was starting to gain weight, her cheeks were less sunken, and there was a new light in her eyes that didn't exist when he found her. But the shadow of the stepmother hung over everything. The woman called daily, always with new demands or reminders about the deadline. Her calls were filled with comments about how small children were vulnerable, about how accidents could happen to those who didn't have adequate protection. The threats were subtle but crystal clear. "Sir," said the housekeeper one afternoon, finding him watching Auburn play in the garden through the window, "I need to talk to you about this situation." Elena had changed visibly in recent days. Initially resistant to the child's presence, she now demonstrated a protective affection that she tried to disguise under her stern facade. She prepared special meals, left small clothes washed and ironed, and had even bought some simple toys during her shopping trips to the market. "What did you find out?" he asked, as he had asked her to do some discreet investigations about the stepmother. "I talked to some people in town very carefully. That woman, whose name is Bernice, moved here less than a year ago. No one knows where she came from exactly, but she always has money for alcohol despite not working." "And Auburn?" "Appeared with her about 8 months ago. People remember because the girl was visibly neglected, but when someone tried to approach or offer help, the said Bernice became aggressive and drove them away." The businessman felt his stomach tighten. Where did they live before? In a small house on the outskirts, away from curious neighbors. But here's the strange thing. I found out that Bernice received some social benefits claiming to be a struggling single mother. She used Auburn as justification, but all the money went to drinks and other things. Did other men appear at the house? Elena hesitated before answering. Yes. Strange men who arrived late at night. The few people who lived nearby avoided asking questions, but there were rumors. The implication made the millionaire's blood run cold. Auburn was even smaller than her real age suggested, so fragile and scared. The idea that that innocence could have been... He couldn't even complete the thought. "There's more," continued Eleanor. "I spoke to the owner of the market where she shopped. Bernice always paid in cash, with small crumpled bills. When I discreetly asked about the girl, he said that Auburn never accompanied the purchases, and when she did appear, she was always hurt and scared." At that moment, Auburn ran inside the house, her cheeks rosy from the fresh air. Her eyes sparkled with joy as she showed a flower she had picked in the garden. "Look how pretty. It's for Grandma Elena." The housekeeper accepted the flower with a genuine smile, the first he had seen on her severe face in years. "Thank you very much, my dear. I'm going to put it in a special vase." Auburn smiled radiantly and ran back to the garden. The two adults watched her play, each lost in their own dark thoughts. "I can't hand her back to that woman," he said finally, "even if it means paying indefinitely. Sir, if we start paying, it will never end. And what happens when she decides that 10,000 isn't enough? And when she brings other men into this negotiation?" Before he could answer, the phone rang. It was Bernice, as if she knew they were talking about her. "So, generous sir, did you get the money? Because I'm getting impatient, and when I get impatient I make rash decisions." "I did," he lied, "but I want guarantees that this resolves the situation definitively." She laughed, an unpleasant sound. "Ah, sure. At least for the next, let's say, 3 months? After that, well, children grow up, they need more things. Private school, expensive clothes, rich toys. 3 months? It's a long time. And look, I had an idea. How about we meet tonight? There's a man here who would like to meet the girl. He says he has experience with special children like her." The suggestive tone made the millionaire feel nauseous. "What kind of experience?" "Oh, you know, lonely men with money who appreciate young company. He offered a very interesting amount for one night with her." "That's disgusting. That's reality, rich man. Children like Auburn have value on the market. I can protect her from these unpleasant situations, but it has a price, a growing price." He hung up the phone forcefully, his hands trembling with anger. Elena watched him with growing concern. What was it? "She's threatening. She's saying she has other buyers for Auburn." The housekeeper paled. "My God!" From the garden came the sound of Auburn's crystalline laughter, a pure and innocent sound that contrasted violently with the conversation they had just had. The millionaire looked out the window and saw her chasing a butterfly, her auburn hair shining in the sun. "Prepare the money," he said grimly. "I'm going to pay what she's asking." "Sir, we have no choice. At least, that gives us more time to find a permanent solution." But as he spoke, a seed of despair began to grow in his chest. What if he couldn't find a solution? What if he was forced to pay increasingly large amounts, watching his fortune be drained by an unscrupulous blackmailer? And what if, even paying, she decided that it was more profitable to sell Auburn to the men she had mentioned? For the first time since building his financial empire, the millionaire felt truly powerless. All his wealth, all his investments and applications meant nothing in the face of the threat that hung over the girl he had learned to love as a daughter. The meeting was scheduled for late afternoon in a discreet square on the outskirts of town. The millionaire arrived with the envelope containing the 10,000 in cash, each bill representing a part of his soul that was being sold to protect Auburn. Bernice was already there, accompanied by a man he hadn't seen before, a thin guy with small eyes and a predatory smile that made his stomach churn. "How punctual!" exclaimed Bernice, clearly animated by the prospect of money. "This here is my friend Roberto. He's very interested in meeting your little protégé." The man extended a sticky hand that the businessman categorically refused. "Where's the money?" "First, I want to clarify a few things," said the millionaire, keeping the envelope firmly in his hands. "How long exactly does this payment cover?" Bernice and Roberto exchanged knowing glances. "Well, as I explained, 3 months. But look, Roberto here made a very interesting proposal." "I'm not interested." "Oh, but you should be." "He offered 15,000 for just one night with the girl. Just imagine, more money than you're paying me, and I wouldn't even have to worry about her for a while." The nausea that the millionaire felt was so intense that for a moment he thought he would vomit right there. Roberto smiled more broadly, clearly perceiving the horror on the rich man's face. "She's brand new, well-trained," said Roberto in a pasty voice. "Bernice told me she's well-behaved, doesn't make noise. Perfect for a man who appreciates special qualities." 15,000, repeated Bernice, her eyes gleaming with greed. "Much more than that measly 10,000 you're offering, unless you want to increase your offer?" The businessman realized the trap. They never intended to accept the 10,000 as a final payment. It was just the first step of a blackmail that would grow indefinitely, with increasingly specific and horrible threats. 20,000, he said, hating every word that came out of his mouth, for 6 months of total peace. Roberto laughed. 6 months? Boy, you don't understand how this works. The merchandise becomes more valuable over time, not less. In 6 months, she may be worth twice as much. Merchandise, repeated the millionaire, feeling the anger boil in his veins. You're talking about a 4-year-old child. We're talking about a product with guaranteed demand, corrected Bernice coldly. And you, rich man, are competing in the market like any other buyer. The mask had fallen completely. They didn't see Auburn as a child, but as a source of income. And by the calculating look in both their eyes, he realized that there would never be peace as long as they knew where to find her. 30,000, he offered desperately. And you disappear forever. Now we're talking, exclaimed Roberto, but 30,000 for 6 months. After that, we renegotiate. Or, said Bernice with a cruel smile, you can stop trying to monopolize the girl and let the market work freely. Roberto here isn't the only one interested. I have a list of clients who would pay very well for time with her. The businessman closed his eyes, trying to block the horrible images that those words evoked. Auburn, so small and fragile in the hands of those monsters, the idea was unbearable. 40,000, he said with a strangled voice. 40,000, and she stays off any list. For 3 months, countered Bernice quickly. 6, 4, and it's my final offer. He opened the envelope and began to count the bills, each representing a piece of his dignity being torn apart. But when he was about to hand them over, Roberto grabbed his arm. Wait a minute. What guarantees do we have that you won't try to hide the merchandise, or worse, that you won't involve the authorities? What kind of guarantees do you want? We want access, said Bernice. Regular visits to check the girl's conditions. After all, we have legal responsibility for her. Visits? Once a week, just to make sure she's being well treated, you understand? And if we notice that you're trying to trick us or involve third parties, Auburn returns to our exclusive protection, completed Roberto with a sinister smile. The millionaire realized that he was being cornered more and more. Not only would he have to pay increasing amounts, but he would also allow those monsters to have regular access to Auburn. The idea of Bernice and Roberto entering his house near the girl made his blood run cold. The visits happen on the front porch, he negotiated. Auburn doesn't need to know you're there. Ah, but she'll want to see her dear stepmother, said Bernice with false sweetness. Missing us, right, Roberto? Of course. And we have to check if she isn't being influenced against us. Children are easily manipulated by malicious adults. The irony of those words coming from Roberto's mouth was so grotesque that the businessman almost laughed. Almost. 50,000, he said finally. 50,000 for 6 months, no visits. 60,000 for 4 months, with bi-weekly visits, countered Bernice immediately. The millionaire realized that he was in an endless spiral. The more he paid, the more they would ask. The more he gave in, the more they would demand. And in the end, regardless of the money, they would always have Auburn as a hostage. I need time to get that amount, he lied, buying time to think of a solution. 3 days, said Roberto, and this time no stalling. Either the money appears or the merchandise returns to the market. As he drove back home, the businessman felt like he was drowning. His fortune, built through years of hard work and smart investments, was being sucked by human leeches. His reserve funds, his Bitcoin applications, his stock market profits, all of this would become irrelevant if he continued on this spiral. When he arrived at the mansion, he found Auburn and Elena in the kitchen, preparing cookies together. The girl was standing on a chair, stirring the dough with a spoon too big for her small hands, laughing as Elena guided her with unprecedented patience. "Daddy!" cried Auburn when she saw him, running to hug him. The words struck him like lightning. Daddy! She had begun to call him that spontaneously, and each time his heart broke a little more. How could he protect her when the protectors themselves were the predators? "How was the meeting, sir?" asked Elena, reading the somber expression on his face. "Complicated," he replied, picking Auburn up in his arms. "Very complicated." That night, while tucking Auburn into her bed, she held his hand tightly. "Daddy, is the bad woman coming back?" The innocent question was like a stab wound. "Why are you asking that?" "Because you're sad. You only get sad when you think about her." The child's insight surprised him. At 4 years old, Auburn had already learned to read the emotions of adults as a matter of survival. "I won't let anyone hurt you," he promised, kissing her forehead. "Never." But as he spoke, a cruel voice in his mind whispered the truth he didn't want to accept. Maybe he had no choice. The following days passed like an emotional storm that threatened to destroy everything the millionaire had built. He found himself in an impossible position. Each bank transfer he authorized to pay the blackmailers represented not only money being drained from his accounts, but pieces of his soul being torn away. His stock investments, which previously grew steadily, now needed to be liquidated at unfavorable prices to meet the increasing demands. Elena watched the deterioration of her employer with growing concern. The confident and successful man she had known for decades was turning into a shadow of himself. His nights were filled with insomnia, spending hours in the office calculating how long his fortune would last if he continued paying increasingly large amounts. "Sir, you need to eat something," she insisted one morning, finding him once again hunched over bank statements. "You've eaten practically nothing in the last 3 days." "I'm not hungry," he murmured, circling numbers in red that represented his gradual financial ruin. "Look, Elena, if I continue paying at the current rate, I'll have to sell the company in 6 months, the house in 8, and then we'll find another solution," she said firmly, "but not by starving yourself and worrying." Auburn appeared at the door of the office, holding a drawing she had made. Her large eyes observed the tired face of the man who had become her heart's father, and she approached slowly. "Is Daddy sick?" "No, little one," he lied, forcing a smile. "I'm just working a lot." "I drew our family," she said, showing the paper. It was a typical child's drawing, 3 stick figures under a yellow sun and a disproportionate house. "This is you, this is Grandma Elena, and this is me. We're happy." The pure simplicity of that drawing broke his heart. Auburn had no idea of the storm that was approaching, of the possibility that her makeshift family could be shattered by the greed of human monsters. "It's beautiful," he said sincerely, kissing the top of her head. "I'll keep it forever." But forever was becoming an increasingly fragile concept. That afternoon, while Auburn played in the garden under Eleanor's watchful eyes, the phone rang. It was Bernice, as always, punctual in her cruelty. "So generous, sir. Did you get my 60,000? "I did," he lied again, "but I need real guarantees this time. Written contracts, defined deadlines." Bernice's laughter echoed through the phone like nails scratching a blackboard. "Contracts? Do you think this is a legitimate business negotiation? We're talking about the black market, honey. Here the rules are different." "Then how can I be sure you'll honor the agreement?" "You can't. And you know why? Because you're not in a position to demand anything. At any moment, I can show up there with the legal documentation and take the girl away. The only reason I'm being generous is because your money makes my life easier." The businessman felt his hands tremble with anger and powerlessness. "What prevents you from simply taking the money and taking Auburn anyway?" "Ah, that would be killing the goose that lays the golden eggs." "You're rich. You have much more to offer than a single transaction. Roberto and I are practical people. We prefer a constant source of income." "And if I don't have any more money to pay?" "Well, then the girl goes back to the free market. And I guarantee that there are many buyers willing to pay for exclusive time with her." The threat was always the same, always effective. The millionaire hung up the phone forcefully, feeling more trapped with each conversation. Elena, who had overheard part of the conversation, approached with a determined expression. "Sir, I need to tell you something. I've done some investigations on my own." "What kind of investigations?" "About the documents that Bernice showed." I got contacts at City Hall through old friends, and I found out something interesting. She took a folder from a drawer and spread papers on the table. The custody documents she presented are fake. Well done, but fake. The businessman's heart raced. Are you sure? Absolutely. The real documentation for Auburn is registered in another name, in another city. And here's the most important part. She has biological family looking for her for months. What do you mean? Auburn is not an orphan, sir. She was kidnapped from a family of merchants almost a year ago. The real parents reported the disappearance, but because they moved from city to city, following false leads, the investigation got lost in the bureaucracy. The revelation hit the millionaire like lightning. Auburn had real parents, a family that loved her and was looking for her. At the same time as he felt relief that she wasn't really an orphan, a sharp pain crossed his chest as he realized that he would lose the girl he had learned to love as a daughter. Where are the parents? In a city about 200 miles from here. They're still looking, offering a reward. They never gave up. Eleanor showed a blurry newspaper photograph. A young couple holding a picture of Auburn, both with devastated expressions of desperate parents. The man had the same eyes as the girl, and the woman the same delicate face shape. They love her, whispered the businessman, touching the photo. Very much. They sold everything they had to finance the searches. They're living in a cheap boarding house, working temporary jobs, but they never stopped looking. And Bernice is part of a network that kidnaps children from poor families for exploitation. Auburn was sold to her by traffickers who took her from the original city. That's why the documents are fake, to give the situation a legal appearance. The millionaire sat down heavily, processing all this information. That means we can hand over the evidence to the authorities and reunite Auburn with her real family, completed Eleanor. But it also means that I will lose her forever. The silence that followed was loaded with pain. Through the window they could see Auburn playing innocently in the garden, oblivious to the fact that her life was about to change again. She will be happy with her real parents, said Elena softly, and free from Bernice and Roberto forever. I know, he murmured, but his voice was choked. It's the right thing to do. But I love her, Elena, as if she were my own daughter. The idea of losing her. Tears that he had been holding back for days finally streamed down his face. For weeks, Auburn had filled a void in his life that he didn't even know existed. She had brought purpose, joy, and love to an existence that had become mechanical after the loss of his wife. True love sometimes means letting go, said Elena, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, and reuniting Auburn with the parents who never stopped looking for her is the greatest act of love you can do for her. At that moment, Auburn came running in, her hair flying behind her as she laughed at something she had seen in the garden. Daddy! Grandma Elena! There's a giant blue butterfly outside. Come see. She took each of their hands, pulling them towards the door with the contagious energy of childhood. And as he walked, being guided by that small hand, the millionaire knew that the most difficult decision of his life would have to be made very soon. The decision to contact the competent authorities was made on a sleepless dawn, when the millionaire finally accepted that his personal happiness could not come before Auburn's well-being. Elena had meticulously organized all the evidence: Bernice's fake documents, the records of Auburn's disappearance, photographs of the real parents, and even recordings of the threatening phone conversations. "We're going to do this the right way," he said, watching Auburn sleep peacefully in her bed. "But first I need to prepare myself to lose her." The following morning brought an unexpected turn of events. The priest from the church, the same one who had expelled Auburn in the storm, appeared at the door of the mansion with a tormented expression on his face. Elena received him coldly, remembering perfectly his initial cruelty. "I want to talk to the man who saved the girl," he said, removing his hat with trembling hands. "You didn't show interest in her well-being before," replied Elena acidly. That's why I'm here, to do what I should have done from the beginning. The millionaire came down to greet him, curious about what could have brought that man there. The priest seemed to have aged years in weeks, his previously authoritative features now marked by guilt and remorse. "I come to ask for forgiveness," he began bluntly, "and to offer information that may be useful." "What kind of information?" "About the woman who claims to be responsible for the girl. Bernice has been looking for other people in town, asking questions about your financial situation, about your routine, about possible vulnerabilities." The businessman exchanged a worried look with Elena. "What kind of questions?" "She wanted to know if you have close relatives, if you travel frequently, if you have security systems in the house. And even more disturbing, she was asking about other children in the area who might be in vulnerable situations." "Other children?" "Apparently, your case with Auburn was just the beginning. Bernice and the men who accompany her are mapping wealthy families who demonstrate affection for children in need. It's as if they were putting together a catalogue of potential targets. The information made the millionaire's blood run cold. They weren't just opportunistic blackmailers. They were part of an organized operation that aimed to exploit both children and the people willing to protect them. "There's more," continued the priest, clearly struggling with his words. "I found out that Auburn wasn't the first child that passed through the city. In the last 2 years, at least 3 other girls disappeared from poor families in the area, all aged between 3 and 5 years old." Eleanor covered her mouth in horror. 3 kids? There were at least 3, but with the nature of our city, it might be more than that, and we would not have noticed. They were all in ages between 3 and 7. "And you knew about this?" "I suspected, but I didn't have proof. And," his voice failed, "and I was too worried about maintaining the church's appearances to get involved." "The appearances," repeated the businessman with contempt, "while children were being kidnapped." "I know what I am," said the priest, tears welling up in his eyes. "A coward, a man who failed in his most basic mission of protecting the innocent. But now I want to help. I have contacts in the competent authorities. I can speed up the investigation process." At that moment, Auburn ran down the stairs, stopping abruptly when she saw the stranger in the room. Her eyes widened in recognition and fear. She remembered perfectly the man who had expelled her from the church. "Daddy?" she whispered, running to hide behind the millionaire. The priest watched the scene with an expression of deep pain. "My little one," he said softly, kneeling to be at her height, "I came to ask for your forgiveness. I did something very ugly to you, and I'm very sorry." Auburn looked at him with cautious curiosity, her little hand clinging tightly to the businessman's pants. "You don't like children?" The innocent question hit the priest like a slap in the face. I should like them. It's my job to like and protect children like you. But I failed, and now I want to fix my mistake." "How?" "Helping you go back home, to your real home, with your real parents." Auburn frowned, confused. "But this is my home, and Daddy and Grandma Elena are my family." The moment was devastating. The millionaire felt as if a knife had pierced his heart. Auburn had no idea that there was another family, other parents who loved her, and had been looking for her for almost a year. "Auburn," he said gently, kneeling beside her, "do you remember, before you came to live with us, other people who took care of you?" She shook her head negatively. "I only remember the bad woman, and being very scared. And before the bad woman?" For a moment a shadow passed through Auburn's eyes, as if fragments of old memories were trying to emerge. There was a lady who sang to me, and a man who made me laugh. But they left when the bad woman arrived." The businessman exchanged meaningful glances with Elena and the priest. Auburn had memories of her real parents, even if vague and distorted by trauma. "What if I told you that those people didn't leave? That they've been looking for you for a long time?" Auburn's eyes filled with tears. "Do they want me back?" "Very much," he confirmed, his own voice choked. "They never stopped looking for you." "But what about you, Daddy? And Grandma Elena?" It was the question he feared most. How to explain to a 4-year-old child that love sometimes means letting go, that sometimes doing the right thing hurts more than any physical wound. "We will always love you," he promised, hugging her against his chest, "even if you go to live with other people. Love doesn't disappear just because people are far away." The priest watched the scene with tears in his eyes. "I can arrange a meeting with the authorities later today," he offered. "The faster we act, the faster Auburn will be safe from Bernice." "And the faster she will leave our lives," murmured Elena, trying to disguise her own pain. That afternoon, while Auburn played in the garden, the 3 adults organized the next steps. The priest had contacted a trusted detective who agreed to come personally to examine the evidence. Elena prepared all the documentation in chronological order, creating a complete dossier on the case. "There's something I need to confess," said the millionaire to the priest. "I've been paying increasingly large amounts to Bernice. My company is on the verge of bankruptcy because of this." "How much?" "In the last 2 months, almost 200,000. My stock investments, my reserve funds, even part of the bitcoins I had bought as a long-term investment. Everything was drained to keep Auburn safe." The priest shook his head sadly. "And even so, it would never be enough. People like Bernice are bottomless pits." "I know. But it was worth every penny to keep Auburn away from those nasty men." In the afternoon, the detective arrived, a serious middle-aged man who examined all the evidence with meticulous attention. After 2 hours of analysis, he raised his eyes with a somber expression. "This is much more serious than simple blackmail," he said. "We're talking about an organized child trafficking network. Bernice and her associates are probably responsible for dozens of similar cases. Will you be able to arrest them?" "With this evidence, yes. But we need to act fast. If they suspect that we've discovered the truth, they may try to take Auburn by force or simply disappear to continue the operation elsewhere." The plan was drawn up for the next day. A coordinated operation would arrest Bernice and Roberto simultaneously, while Auburn would be officially handed over to the authorities for reunification with her real parents. That night, the millionaire spent hours watching Auburn sleep, memorizing every detail of her small face, every soft breath. In less than 24 hours, she would no longer be there, and the mansion would return to the empty silence that had become unbearable. The morning of the operation arrived loaded with tension and expectation. The millionaire had spent the night sleepless, alternating between the relief of knowing that Auburn would finally be safe and the stabbing pain of losing her. Elena prepared breakfast with more care than ever, as if each gesture could preserve normalcy for a few more precious moments. Auburn woke up earlier than normal, as if sensing that something important was about to happen. She came down the stairs in her pajamas, carrying the teddy bear that the millionaire had bought her in the second week. "Daddy looks sad again," she observed, climbing into the chair next to him. "Is it because of the bad woman?" "Not exactly, little one," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Today, some important changes are going to happen." "What kind of changes?" Elena approached with a cup of warm milk, her red eyes revealing that she had also spent the night crying. "Auburn, do you remember that we talked about the people who sang to you and made you laugh? The ones who left when the bad woman arrived. They didn't leave, honey. They've been looking for you all this time. And today, you're going to meet them again." Auburn's little face lit up for a moment, but then darkened with confusion. "But I don't want to leave here. You're my family now." The innocence of that statement was like a dagger in the hearts of both adults. The millionaire picked Auburn up in his arms, hugging her against his chest as if he could protect her from all the pain in the world. "Sometimes in life, little one, we have to make difficult choices, and the right choice isn't always the one that makes us happy at the moment. I don't understand. One day you will understand, and when you grow up, you'll know that everything we did was out of love." The phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was the detective, confirming that the operation was underway. Bernice and Roberto had been located and were being monitored. In 2 hours, everything would be over. "Auburn's parents are on their way," he informed. "They should arrive around noon." The millionaire hung up with trembling hands. There were still 4 hours left, but it seemed that time was running like a river in a cataract, taking away the last moments he would have with the girl who had become his heart's daughter. Elena had prepared a small suitcase with the new clothes they had bought for Auburn, along with her favorite toys and the teddy bear. Each item, folded carefully, represented a memory that was being packed to leave. "Grandma Elena, why are you putting my things in the suitcase?" "Because you're going to travel today, my dear, to meet very special people." "And then I come back?" The silence that followed was deafening. Auburn looked between the two adults, her precocious intelligence grasping the truth that they were trying to soften. "I'm not coming back, am I?" The millionaire knelt in front of her, holding her small hands. "Auburn, you know we love you very much, right?" She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "And you know that we always want what's best for you?" Another nod, more hesitant. "Sometimes what's best for the people we love means letting them go where they will be happiest. And you have a real mum and dad who love you as much as we do, but who knew you first. But I like you, and we like you too, very, very, very much. But they are your blood parents, little one. And when you were lost and scared, they never stopped looking for you." Tears began to run down Auburn's face. At 4 years old, she couldn't fully comprehend the complexity of the situation, but she understood that she was about to lose the only people who had given her genuine love in recent months. "If I'm very good, can I stay?" The question broke the millionaire's heart into 1,000 pieces. "Oh, my little one, you are the best girl in the whole world. This has nothing to do with you being good or not." At 10 in the morning, the priest arrived with news of the operation. Bernice and Roberto had been arrested in the act of trying to negotiate another child with a buyer. Their phones contained evidence of a network much larger than initially suspected. "Photographs of at least 15 different children were found," he reported somberly. "Ages between 3 and 7 years, all supposedly available to different types of clients." Elena covered her mouth, horrified. 15 children? The investigation is just beginning. But the important thing is that Auburn is safe now and will never be threatened by those people again. Auburn watched the adults' conversation with large, frightened eyes. Even not understanding completely, she realized that something terrible had been prevented from happening. "The bad woman won't come to get me anymore." "Never again," promised the priest. "She's in a place where she can't hurt any child." At noon sharp, 2 cars arrived at the mansion. From the first came the detective, followed by a social worker. From the second, a young couple who could barely walk from so much anxiety and expectation. The millionaire watched through the window and immediately recognized Auburn's parents from the photographs Eleanor had shown. The man had the same expressive eyes as the girl, and the woman, despite being visibly exhausted by the months of searching, carried on her face a maternal love that was impossible to ignore. "They've arrived," he announced with a choked voice. Auburn ran to the window and looked out. For a few seconds, she watched the couple in silence. Then, something changed in her expression, a flash of recognition, as if buried memories were emerging. I know them," she whispered, her small voice trembling. "You know them." The woman sang a song, a beautiful song about little birds, and the man, he carried me on his shoulder, and I touched the leaves of the trees. The memories were coming back, fragmented but real. The millionaire felt a mixture of joy and pain. Joy because Auburn was remembering the parents who loved her. Pain because that made his own farewell even more definitive. The doorbell rang, the sound echoing through the mansion like a final sentence. Elena went to answer, her own tears running freely down her face. When she returned, she was accompanied by the detective, the social worker, and the couple who had spent almost a year in agony. The moment the biological mother saw Auburn, she fell to her knees, stretching out her arms with a sob that came from the bottom of her soul. "My baby," she cried. "My little Auburn." Auburn hesitated for a few seconds, looking between her adoptive and biological parents. Then, slowly, she walked towards the woman who was crying. When she was almost there, she stopped and turned to the millionaire. "Daddy, is everything going to be okay?" "Everything is going to be okay," he promised, even feeling as if his world was collapsing. "Everything is going to be perfect." Auburn smiled through the tears and ran into the arms of her biological mother. The reunion was overwhelming. Desperate hugs, tears of relief, words of love murmured between sobs. The biological father approached the millionaire with eyes full of gratitude. "We have no words to thank you for what you did for our daughter." "No need to thank me," murmured the businessman. She gave me much more than I gave her." While the family reunited, Elena quietly packed Auburn's last belongings. In a few hours, the house would return to silence. But now that silence would carry echoes of children's laughter and memories of love that would never be forgotten. The farewell was even more painful than the millionaire had imagined. Auburn, even happy to reunite with her biological parents, struggled against the confusion of having to leave the people who had become her family in recent months. She alternated between hugging her real parents and running back to the businessman and Elena, as if she couldn't completely process the situation. "Can I take my teddy bear?" she asked, holding the stuffed animal against her chest. "Of course you can, honey," said the biological mother, a sweet woman of approximately 30 years named Carmen, "and everything else you want." "And can I come back to visit Daddy and Grandma Eleanor?" The question created a moment of awkward silence. The detective had explained that, although there were no legal impediments to future visits, the most recommended would be that Auburn completely adapt to life with her biological parents before maintaining contact with temporary attachment figures. "We'll talk about that when you're well settled at home," said the biological father diplomatically. He was a simple-looking man but kind eyes, who worked as a merchant in a small town. The millionaire understood the subtext. It was unlikely that he would see Auburn again. The parents, understandably, wanted to rebuild the bond with their daughter without the competition of other parental figures. It was painful, but it made sense. "Auburn," he called, kneeling one last time beside her, "I want you to remember one very important thing." "What, Daddy?" "You are a very special girl, very brave and very loved. And no matter where you are or how long you spend, there will always be a place in a piece of my heart just for you." She squeezed him tight, whispering in his ear, "You have a place in my heart too, Dad. A really big place." Grandma Eleanor said goodbye with the dignity that always defined her, but her tears were impossible to hold back when Auburn called her Grandma Elena one last time. "Take good care of your real parents," she murmured, kissing the girl's forehead. "They love you very much. I know, but you love me too, right? Always, my little one, always." As Auburn's biological parents' car finally drove away from the mansion, the millionaire and Grandma Eleanor stood at the entrance, watching until it disappeared completely around the bend in the road. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy as a lead blanket. "The house feels dead," Grandma Elena murmured, breaking the silence first. "It does," he agreed, looking out at the gardens where Auburn had played that morning. Her toys were still scattered on the lawn, like ghostly evidence of a life that had departed. The following days were the hardest the millionaire had faced since losing his wife. The mansion echoed with memories, the sound of Auburn's laughter in the hallways, her innocent little questions during meals, the sound of her little feet running on the marble stairs. Each room carried memories that became both precious and torturous. Grandma Eleanor tried to maintain the normal routine, but it was impossible to ignore that she no longer needed to prepare small portions at meals or leave special cookies cooling in the kitchen. The house had returned to its quiet efficiency of before, but now that efficiency seemed cold and pointless. "Sir," she said one morning, a week after Auburn's departure, "I received a call from the lawyers. They want to discuss the company's financial situation." Practical reality returned like a cold bucket of water. During the months paying the blackmailers, the millionaire had liquidated most of his stock market shares, emptied reserve accounts, and even sold some of his Bitcoin at unfavorable prices. His company, which had once had a solid foundation built over years, now faced serious financial difficulties. "How long do we have before bankruptcy?" "According to preliminary calculations, maybe 6 months if there isn't a significant recovery in profits." "And the house?" "It may be necessary to sell it to cover the company's debts." It was ironic. He had fought so hard to protect Auburn, spent a fortune to keep her safe, and now that she was gone, he discovered that his financial life was in ruins. But strangely, he felt no regret. Every dollar spent had been worth it if it meant Auburn was now safe with people who loved her. 2 weeks after the goodbye, the priest appeared again at the mansion. This time, he brought news about the investigation that followed Bernice and Roberto's arrest. "The network was much larger than we imagined," he reported gravely. 17 children were rescued in 5 different cities. All were being exploited in various ways. "And Auburn? Did they hurt her in other ways?" "No," the priest replied with relief. "Apparently Bernice was reserving her for clients who paid more for preserved innocence. That's why you found her relatively intact, just neglected and emotionally abused." The millionaire felt a mix of relief and nausea. Auburn had narrowly escaped unimaginable horrors. Do her parents know this? They know what they need to. The more sordid details were spared them, so they can focus on their daughter's emotional recovery. "How is she adapting?" The priest hesitated before answering. "From what I've heard through the social workers, she's been asking about you all every day, especially at night when she's scared." The information was like a knife to the businessman's heart. Auburn was missing them, probably confused about why she had been abandoned again by people she said she loved. Are her parents being understanding? They're trying, but they're also dealing with their own traumas, almost a year searching for their daughter, fearing the worst. Now that they've recovered her, they want to make up for all the lost time. That's understandable. It is, but perhaps with time, when the situation stabilizes. "No," the millionaire interrupted firmly. "Auburn needs to adapt to her real life, with her real family. It wouldn't be fair to create emotional confusion by maintaining contact." But even saying that, a part of him clung to the secret hope that perhaps one day Auburn's parents would allow him to be a part of her life in some way, even if small. A month after the farewell, Grandma Elena found her boss in the study, looking out the same window from which he had watched Auburn play in the garden. In his hands, he held the last drawing she had made, the one that showed the Stick family under the yellow sun. "Sir, mail's arrived," she said, holding out a small envelope. The envelope had no return address, but the millionaire immediately recognized the childish handwriting on the address. Inside, there was a new drawing by Auburn, this time showing 4 figures, her in the center, holding the hands of a couple that clearly represented her biological parents, but on the other side, 2 smaller figures who were unmistakably him and Grandma Elena. On the back, in crooked letters and handwriting still developing, was written, "To Dad and Grandma Elena. Love you, Auburn." It was the first time in weeks that the millionaire had genuinely smiled. Auburn hadn't forgotten them. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope that the love they had shared would find a way to continue existing, even from a distance. Grandma Elena, watching his reaction, sighed in relief. "At least we know she's okay." "She is," he agreed, carefully putting away the drawing. And that's what matters. But even saying that, a deep ache continued gnawing at his chest. The house remained empty, his business continued to decline, and the future seemed uncertain and lonely. 3 months had passed since Auburn's departure, and the millionaire's financial situation had deteriorated even more quickly than predicted. The family company, which had once been a prosperous empire with diversified investments and enviable assets, now faced the imminence of bankruptcy. The latest accounting reports painted a devastating picture: accumulated debts, negative cash flow, and insufficient assets to cover the liabilities. Grandma Eleanor found herself in an equally delicate position. As the housekeeper of a house that might need to be sold soon, her future was also uncertain. But surprisingly, her main concern was not her own financial security, but the emotional state of the man she had served faithfully for decades. "Sir," she said on a particularly somber morning, "the lawyers called again. They're pressing for a decision on the sale of the mansion." The businessman was sitting in his leather armchair, staring at piles of documents that represented the dismantling of everything he had built. Contracts for the sale of shares at ridiculously low prices, forced liquidations of investments, emergency loans with astronomical interest rates, all to keep the company running for a few more months. "How much longer do we have? If we sell the house now, we might be able to save part of the business. If we wait longer, we'll lose everything. And the employees? They'll have to be laid off next week if there isn't a significant capital injection." The irony of the situation didn't escape the millionaire. He had spent a fortune trying to protect a child who wasn't even his, and now dozens of families who depended on his company would face unemployment because of his decisions. It was the price of having put his heart above reason. "Prepare the papers for the sale," he said finally, each word coming out like a painful confession. "I can't let the employees pay the price for my choices." Grandma Eleanor nodded sadly, but before she could leave to make the necessary calls, the phone rang. It was the priest, and there was something different in his voice, an urgency mixed with hope. "I need to see you immediately," he said. "It's about Auburn." The businessman's heart leaped. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "She's physically fine, but it's complicated. Can I come over now?" An hour later, the priest was sitting in the mansion's living room, his nervous hands revealing the gravity of what he had to say. Grandma Eleanor had prepared coffee, but none of the three touched the cups. "Auburn's parents contacted me," he began bluntly. "They're desperate. Why?" "Auburn isn't adapting well to life with them, not for lack of love or care. They're wonderful people and they love her deeply. But she has constant nightmares, inexplicable crying fits, and she asks for you all every day, especially at night when she's scared. She calls for Dad and Grandma Elena. Her parents are starting to realize that you've become fundamental safety figures for her." The millionaire felt a mix of hope and pain. Knowing that Auburn missed them brought joy to his heart, but also intensified the guilt for his absence in the girl's life. "What do they want?" "They want to meet you. Talk about the possibility of Auburn maintaining some kind of contact, not as a replacement for her real family, but as emotional support figures." Grandma Elena leaned forward, interested. "Did they say that?" "They said they realized that you weren't just people who temporarily cared for Auburn. You were people who saved her and loved her when she needed it most, and that kind of bond can't simply be cut without consequences." "Where are they?" "In a town 2 hours from here. Carmen, the mother, said she'd like to bring her for a visit, to see if that helps Auburn process the situation better." The businessman looked at Grandma Elena, seeing his own conflicting feelings reflected in the housekeeper's face. The prospect of seeing Auburn again was exciting, but also terrifying. What if she had forgotten them? What if the visit only confused the girl more? "But there's a problem," continued the priest, hesitating. "What?" "They found out about your financial situation. Carmen works in a cooperative that has connections with social agencies, and information arrived about your company's difficulties." The millionaire paled. Do they know I spent almost everything to protect Auburn? They do. And Carmen was devastated when she found out. She feels indirectly responsible for your financial ruin. That's ridiculous. I made my choices. That's what I tried to explain to her. But Carmen is a very sensitive woman, and the idea that you sacrificed so much for Auburn and are now facing difficulties because of it, she can't passively accept it. Grandma Eleanor frowned. What does she intend to do? She and her husband want to help financially. They don't have much. They're simple people from a small town. But they're willing to use all the savings they had been saving to search for Auburn to help you. No, said the businessman immediately. I won't accept money from them. They've already gone through enough suffering. That's what I imagined you'd say, sighed the priest. But Carmen is stubborn. She said that if you don't accept help from them, she won't allow Auburn to visit you. That's emotional blackmail. It's love, really. Love from a mother who understands that her daughter needs you, but who can't bear the idea that you're suffering for having saved that same daughter. At that moment, Grandma Elena spoke up for the first time. Sir, perhaps we should consider... No, Grandma Elena. I won't accept charity from people who have already suffered so much. It wouldn't be charity, insisted the priest. It would be one family helping another family. Because that's what you've become. Family. Maybe not by blood, but by love and sacrifice. The phone rang at that moment, interrupting the conversation. It was one of the company's lawyers, with even worse news than before. Sir, we received a purchase proposal for the company, said the lawyer. But the value offered is much lower than we expected. If you accept, you'll be able to pay off the main debts, but you'll be left with practically nothing. And if I don't accept, total bankruptcy in 2 weeks. All assets will be auctioned off, and you'll still be left with significant personal debts. When he hung up the phone, the businessman felt like a man on the edge of a precipice. On the left side, total financial ruin. On the right side, the humiliation of accepting help from people who had already suffered too much. How soon do they want to come? He finally asked the priest. Carmen said they can come on the weekend. Auburn is anxious, but also nervous. She's not sure if you still like her. The implicit question broke the millionaire's heart. How can she think that? Because in the mind of a 4-year-old child, when people she loves disappear from her life, it must be her fault. She thinks she did something wrong, that she wasn't good enough. Grandma Elena wiped away the tears that began to flow. We need to see her. She needs to know that we still love her. But I won't accept money from them, reiterated the businessman stubbornly. The priest smiled sadly. Then prepare for a very difficult conversation with Carmen, because she's as stubborn as you are, and she has an advantage that you don't. What? She has Auburn, and Auburn needs you as much as you need her. It was an emotional impasse that had no easy solution. Pride against love, dignity against need, the past against the future. And in the center of everything, a 4-year-old girl who just wanted the people she loved to be happy together. The weekend arrived laden with expectation and nervousness. The millionaire had spent the previous days trying to tidy up the mansion to receive Auburn and her parents, even knowing that it might be one of the last times the house would be presentable before the forced sale. Grandma Elena had prepared special cookies, the same ones Auburn loved, and cleaned every corner of the house as if she were preparing for a royal inspection. "Sir, you're shaking," Grandma Elena observed when the visitor's car appeared at the end of the driveway. "I'm nervous," he admitted. "What if she's forgotten us? What if she doesn't recognize us anymore?" "Auburn would never forget you." "Impossible." When the car stopped in front of the main entrance, the first to get out was Auburn's biological father, a simple man named Mark, with modest but clean clothes, carrying an air of working-class dignity. Next came Carmen, a woman with delicate features who carried in her eyes the mark of suffering lived, but also a fierce maternal determination. And then Auburn got out of the car. The millionaire felt as if time had stopped. She had grown visibly in the 3 months of separation. Her hair was longer and well-groomed, and she wore a simple but pretty dress that Carmen had obviously chosen with care. But it was the expression on her face that broke his heart. A mixture of joy, nervousness, and a shyness that didn't exist before. "Dad?" she said hesitantly, as if she wasn't sure she could still call him that. "Auburn!" he exclaimed, kneeling down and opening his arms. She ran towards him with all the speed her little legs allowed, throwing herself into his arms with a force that almost knocked him over. The hug was long, desperate, full of 3 months of accumulated longing. "I missed you, Dad," she murmured against his neck. "I missed you so much." "Me too, little one. Every day." Grandma Elena approached, and Auburn immediately extended an arm to include her in the hug, creating a circle of love that made Carmen's eyes fill with tears. "Grandma Elena, did you make cookies?" "Of course I did, my dear. Your favorites." While Auburn delighted in the displays of affection, Mark and Carmen watched the scene with a mixture of gratitude and melancholy. It was obvious that the girl had created deep bonds with these people, bonds that went far beyond simple temporary care. "Thank you for receiving us," said Carmen as they entered the mansion. Her eyes scanned the luxurious environment with admiration, but also with a visible discomfort. "Auburn talked so much about you that we needed to meet you in person." "The pleasure is ours," replied the millionaire, watching Auburn run through the house as if she were reliving precious memories. "How is she adapting?" Carmen and Mark exchanged meaningful glances. "Physically, she's fine," said Mark carefully. "She's gaining weight, she plays, she smiles. But at night she has nightmares," completed Carmen, her voice choked. "And when she's scared or insecure, she calls for you. It's as if you're her emotional safety figures." "That must be difficult for you," observed Grandma Elena with empathy. "It is," admitted Carmen. "I won't lie. Sometimes it hurts to know that our daughter finds comfort in other people, but we also understand that you saved her when she needed it most, and that kind of gratitude, that kind of love, can't simply be ignored." Auburn ran back into the room, carrying one of the toys she had forgotten on departure. "Dad, can I play in the garden?" "Of course you can, little one." While Auburn played outside, always visible through the large windows, the 4 adults sat down for the most important conversation of their lives. "We found out about the situation of your company," said Carmen directly, without beating around the bush. "The priest told us." The millionaire stiffened. "That has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with us," exclaimed Carmen with a passion that surprised everyone. "You ruined yourselves financially protecting our daughter. How can we simply ignore that? Because those were my choices. No one forced me to do anything." "Choices made out of love," said Mark softly. "The same love that made us search for Auburn tirelessly for almost a year." Grandma Eleanor spoke up. "Carmen, Mark, we deeply appreciate your concern, but Sir is too proud to accept financial help." "Pride?" repeated Carmen, getting up from her chair. "Do you think this is a matter of pride?" She walked to the window, watching Auburn play peacefully in the garden. When she turned around, her tears were flowing freely. "Do you know what it's like to spend almost a year without knowing if your daughter is alive or dead? Do you know what it's like to wake up every day, imagining the horrors she might be suffering? Do you know what it's like to sell everything you have, work 3 different jobs, sleep in cheap boarding houses, all in the hope of finding her?" The silence in the room was total. And then we found out that during the most terrible time of our life, there were people protecting our girl. Not just protecting, but loving, caring, sacrificing everything for her. "And you think we're just going to say thank you and move on?" "Carmen," tried the millionaire. "No," she interrupted him. "Mark and I talked a lot about this. We don't have much money. We're simple people, but we have some savings that we were saving to rebuild our life after finding Auburn. And we decided we want to use that money to help you." "I can't accept." "Then don't accept it as charity," said Mark, standing up to stand by his wife. Accept it as an investment. How so? We want to be minority partners in your company. Small partners, but partners. We want to be part of rebuilding what you lost, saving our daughter. The proposal caught the millionaire completely off guard. You don't even know my business. We know you, said Carmen firmly. And we know that a man capable of sacrificing everything for a child who wasn't even his is a man in whom we can trust our financial future. Grandma Elena looked at her boss, seeing the internal battle he waged between pride and need. There's more, continued Mark. We want to move to this town. Carmen got a transfer at her job, and I can open a small business here. Why? For Auburn, replied Carmen. She needs you, and we need her to be happy. If that means sharing our daughter with the people who saved her, then that's what we'll do. Share? Auburn would have two families, explained Mark. Us as biological parents, you as, well, as the special aunts and uncles who became parental figures during the most difficult moment of her life. The millionaire looked out the window, watching Auburn play. The girl seemed genuinely happy, but there was something in her movements that revealed the need for constant approval, as if she still feared being abandoned again. And if that confuses her even more, or if it gives her the sense of security she needs, countered Carmen, the certainty that the people she loves won't simply disappear from her life. At that moment, Auburn ran into the house, climbing onto the millionaire's lap with her usual naturalness. Dad, am I going to live here again? The innocent question struck all the adults like lightning. The millionaire looked at Carmen and Mark, seeing in their eyes the same pain and the same hope he felt. Little one, he said carefully, you're going to live with your mommy Carmen and your daddy Mark, but maybe we can see each other a lot. Every day? Carmen approached, sitting down next to them. Auburn, how would you feel if we could live in a house near here? And you could visit Dad and Grandma Eleanor whenever you want? Auburn's eyes lit up with a joy she hadn't shown in months. Can I really? If we all agree, said Mark. Yes. Auburn looked at each adult as if checking if they were all serious. Then, with the simple wisdom of childhood, she smiled. So I'm going to have two families. One big family, a very big family, confirmed Grandma Eleanor, emotional. And at that moment, they all knew they had found the solution none of them had dared to imagine. The following months became a period of careful and hopeful rebuilding. The partnership between the millionaire and Auburn's biological parents proved more complex than anyone had anticipated, but also more rewarding. Carmen and Mark moved into a modest house just 10 minutes from the mansion, and Auburn began dividing her time between the two families with a naturalness that surprised everyone. The first big decision was about the bankrupt company. Mark, despite being a simple merchant, possessed a keen instinct for business, developed through years managing small family businesses. Carmen, in turn, worked in an agricultural cooperative and understood community management and financial planning. We don't need to save everything, Mark said at a meeting with the lawyers. We need to save what matters and rebuild on a solid foundation. The strategy they developed was revolutionary for traditional business standards. Instead of trying to maintain the previous financial empire, they chose to completely resize the business, focusing on smaller but more sustainable ventures. The millionaire sold the mansion, but not to strangers. He sold it to an investment group that Carmen had met through her cooperative, people committed to transforming the property into a support center for families who had lost children or who were struggling to find them. It was a way to give purpose to the place that had been the scene of so much love and suffering. It's perfect, Auburn said, when she learned that the house would become a place to help other families. So other lost children can be happy here too. With the money from the sale of the mansion and the investment from Carmen and Mark, they established a consulting firm specializing in family reunification and support for children at risk. The millionaire used his contacts and business experience, Carmen brought her knowledge of social systems, and Mark contributed his talent for logistics and operations. Grandma Elena, initially concerned about her future after the sale of the mansion, discovered that she had found not only a new job, but a new family. She became the administrative coordinator of the new company, and her experience in home management translated perfectly to the management of complex cases. "I never thought I'd spend my final working years helping to reunite families," she said on a particularly rewarding day, when they managed to locate a child who had been missing for 6 months. "But I can't imagine doing anything else." Auburn flourished in this new family arrangement. During the week, she lived with Carmen and Mark, attending a local school where she quickly became popular for her kindness and emotional maturity, unusual for her age. On weekends and holidays, she stayed with the millionaire and Grandma Elena, who had moved to a comfortable but much smaller house on the outskirts of town. "Dad," she said one Saturday afternoon, while helping Grandma Elena prepare cookies, "why do you seem happier now than when you lived in the big house?" The question caught the businessman off guard. He stopped reviewing the company reports to truly look at himself for the first time in months. "You know, little one, I think it's because now I know why I'm working. Didn't you know before? Before I worked to make money. Now I work to help families like ours. Our family is special, right? Very special." And it really was. Carmen and Mark had adapted to the presence of additional parental figures in Auburn's life with a generosity that surprised everyone. Far from feeling jealous or insecure, they seemed genuinely grateful that Auburn had so many people who loved her. "At first it was difficult," admitted Carmen in a frank conversation with Grandma Elena. "Seeing Auburn call another man Dad hurt. But then we realized she wasn't replacing us. She was just expanding her capacity to love." "And you? How do you feel now?" "Safe," replied Carmen without hesitation. "For the first time since Auburn disappeared, I feel completely safe. Because I know that if something happens to us, she has other people who love her as much as we do." Mark had also developed a special relationship with the former millionaire. The two men, despite completely different backgrounds, discovered that they shared fundamental values about family, hard work, and integrity. "You taught me that money without purpose is just paper," Mark said one night when they were working together on a particularly difficult case. "And I hope I've taught you that purpose without simplicity can become empty." "You taught me," confirmed the businessman. "And much more than that." The company grew steadily, but organically and sustainably. They had helped to reunite dozens of families, and their reputation spread through social assistance networks in various cities. The work was emotionally challenging, but deeply rewarding. "Each case is like reliving our own story," observed Carmen after they helped locate a 3-year-old girl who had been kidnapped by distant relatives. "The difference is that now we can be the light at the end of the tunnel for other families." Auburn became, inadvertently, a kind of mascot of the company. Her presence in the offices, always on weekends, brought hope to desperate parents who saw in her proof that lost children could be found and that destroyed families could be rebuilt. "That little girl is a miracle," said a mother who had reunited with her son after 8 months of separation. "Seeing her happy, surrounded by so many people who love her, gave me the strength not to give up." But not everything was perfect. Auburn still had occasional nightmares, moments of anxiety when unknown adults approached, and a constant need for confirmation that her families would not abandon her. "It's normal," explained the child psychologist who was following her development. "Children who have experienced abandonment trauma take years to feel completely safe. The important thing is that she has multiple sources of emotional stability." And she did. In Carmen, she found pure maternal love and the security of a biological mother. In Mark, she discovered paternal protection and the guidance of a present father. In The Ex-Millionaire, she maintained the figure of the heroic protector who had saved her in the darkest moments. And in Grandma Eleanor, she had the constancy of a loving grandmother who would always be there regardless of the circumstances. "I have 4 people who are just mine," she said in a session with the psychologist. "And they'll never leave me because they love each other too." The childish observation perfectly captured the dynamic that had developed. It wasn't just a child being loved by multiple adults. It was a genuine extended family where everyone supported each other. A year after the reconstruction, the company had become a regional reference in family reunification. They had developed innovative methods that combined technology, social media, and traditional investigation. More importantly, they had created a business model that was both profitable and socially responsible. "We did it," said the ex-millionaire at an annual review meeting. "We not only rebuilt financially, but we created something meaningful." "We did it because we kept our focus on what really matters," replied Carmen. "Family." "And love," added Mark. "And cookies," completed Auburn, making everyone laugh. As they laughed together in the office that had become the center of their rebuilt lives, none of them could imagine that a fundamental piece was still missing to complete the story. A discovery that would change everything once again, but this time in a way that would bring final redemption for all the sacrifices they had made. 2 years had passed since the formation of the extended family, and life had found a harmonious rhythm that no one dared to dream possible. Auburn, now 6 years old, was a vibrant and confident child who attended the local school and had become the gravitational center of a family that defied all traditional conventions. On that spring morning, the ex-millionaire was in his office when he received a call that would change everything once again. It was from a lawyer specializing in victim rights, representing an international organization fighting human trafficking. "Sir, we are contacting you because Auburn's case has generated a much broader investigation than we initially imagined," said the lawyer. "Bernice and Roberto were just the tip of a huge iceberg." "What did you discover?" "The network they were part of has been completely dismantled. They were responsible for the disappearance of more than 50 children in 3 different countries. And there's a very significant development." The businessman sat down, sensing that big news was coming. "International authorities are offering substantial compensation to the families of the victims, not only for the children who were recovered, but also for the people who suffered losses, helping in the rescue or protection of those children." "Compensation? In your specific case, the amount would be enough not only to recover everything you lost financially, but also to significantly expand the family reunification work you've developed." The ex-millionaire's heart raced. "How much are we talking about?" "Approximately $5 million. To be paid over 3 years, with the condition that the money be used to continue the work of child protection and family reunification." The revelation was so surreal that he had to ask the lawyer to repeat everything. $5 million, an amount that would not only restore his previous fortune, but multiply it several times, allowing them to expand their work to international levels. When he hung up the phone, his hands were shaking. He immediately called Carmen, Mark, and Grandma Elena, asking them to come to the office urgently. Auburn was at school, so they could talk freely about the implications of this discovery. "Is this real?" asked Carmen, reading the documents that the lawyer had sent by fax. $5 million. "It seems so," confirmed Mark, examining the legal papers. "And look at the conditions. The money has to be used to expand the work we're already doing." Grandma Eleanor shook her head in disbelief. "It's as if the universe is correcting an injustice." "Or rewarding the sacrifice," observed Carmen. "You lost everything saving Auburn. Now you're getting so much more back." "But there's an important question," said the ex-millionaire, his always practical mind working quickly. "If we accept this money, our small family business will become an international organization. That will change everything." "For the better?" asked Mark. For much better, in terms of how many families we can help. But it will also mean much more responsibility, constant travel, international pressure. Carmen got up and walked to the window, watching children playing in the playground in front of the office. How many Aubans could we save with $5 million? Hundreds, replied Grandma Elena without hesitation. Maybe thousands. Then the answer is obvious, said Mark. We accept. And Auburn? How will this affect her? Auburn grew up seeing you help other families, observed Carmen. She knows that your work saves children like her. I think she'd be proud to know that she can help even more. That afternoon, when Auburn returned from school, they gathered at Carmen and Mark's house to tell the news. The girl listened to everything, with her big eyes widened, processing complex information with the seriousness that only children who have matured early possess. Does that mean we're going to help many lost children like I was? She asked finally. It means exactly that, confirmed the ex-millionaire. And you're going to travel to other countries? Sometimes, yes. Auburn was thoughtful for a few moments. Can I go along sometimes? To show the children that they can be happy again? The question deeply touched all the adults present. At 6 years old, Auburn already understood that her story of overcoming could be a source of hope for other children in similar situations. When you're older, promised Carmen, and if you want to, yes. I want to, said Auburn with determination. I want to help. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. The small family business had become the Auburn Foundation, an international organization with offices in 5 countries and a growing reputation in combating child trafficking and family reunification. The ex-millionaire had recovered not only his financial stability, but discovered a purpose that went far beyond the simple accumulation of wealth. His investments now included tracking technologies, international database systems, and training programs for local authorities. Carmen had become the director of operations of the foundation, supervising cases in multiple countries. Mark managed the complex logistics of international operations. Grandma Elena coordinated psychological support for reunited families. And Auburn, even as a child, had inadvertently become the symbol of hope that the foundation represented. She is our living proof that miracles happen, said a journalist during an interview about the work of the foundation. Seeing Auburn happy, loved, and now helping other children is inspiring. On a special afternoon, 5 years after that first meeting in the storm, Auburn was playing in the garden of the family's new house when she saw a car approaching. It was the priest, now much older, but with a radiant smile on his face. "Priest!" cried Auburn, running to hug him. "You came to visit us." "I did, my dear, and I brought a surprise." From the car came a girl of approximately 4 years old, shy and scared, holding the hand of a woman who was clearly a social worker. "This is Amy," explained the priest. "She was lost, like you were, and we thought that maybe you could help her feel less scared." Auburn looked at the smaller girl, immediately recognizing the fear and confusion in her eyes. Without hesitation, she approached slowly and extended her hand. "Hi, Amy, I'm Auburn. You're safe now." "How do you know?" asked Amy in a small voice. "Because I was lost before too. And these people," she pointed to her extended family, "found me, and now they're going to take care of you too until we find your real family." Amy looked around, seeing the gentle faces of the adults, the beautiful garden, Auburn smiling at her with genuine understanding. "Is everything going to be okay?" she asked. "Everything's going to be okay," promised Auburn, with the authority of someone who knew both despair and redemption. "It's going to be better than you can imagine." As he watched Auburn guiding Amy through the house, showing her the rooms, the toys, introducing her to each member of the family, the ex-millionaire felt a deep peace settling in his heart. The storm that had started his journey had transformed into something he could never have anticipated. Not only had he found a daughter of the heart, but discovered an extended family, a purpose in life, and a way to transform suffering into hope. Carmen approached him, watching the two girls playing together. "Remember when you thought losing Auburn would be the end of everything?" "I remember," he said, smiling. "I was so wrong." "You weren't wrong. You were just seeing only one part of the story." Mark joined them, Grandma Elena beside him. The family that had been born from pain was now complete, united not only by the love for Auburn, but by the shared mission of ensuring that other children also found their ways back home. "Auburn was right," observed Grandma Elena, watching the girl patiently explain to Amy how their family worked. "We really became a very big family, and it will continue to grow," said Carmen, watching other cars arriving, more social workers, more children in need, more families looking for hope. The ex-millionaire looked around, at the modest but warm house, at the unconventional but deeply united family, at the work that had transformed personal tragedy into collective salvation. On the night of that terrible storm, when he found a small and scared girl being kicked out of a church, he never could have imagined that he was beginning the most important journey of his life, a journey that would lead him from empty wealth to true purpose, from loneliness to family, from despair to renewed hope. And as he watched Auburn, now a confident and loving child, helping another lost child feel at home, he knew with absolute certainty that every sacrifice, every tear, every moment of despair had been worth it. Because sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what really matters. And sometimes saving a child means saving yourself. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.